So, 2,500 years ago, in northern India, a little girl was born, and her parents named her Khemā. Any of you know who I'm talking about? You know who this is? Oh, really? That's so nice. You do too, because I said it recently? Oh, no, not from that. You know more. You know the story? No, you don't know more than I said.
Well, I read it like years ago in Buddhist canon.
Oh, good. Isn't she wonderful? Oh, everybody loves Khemā. So she was born into a wealthy family, and she grew up. And as she entered her teen years, it became clear that she was extraordinarily beautiful, extremely beautiful. And so beautiful that she eventually became the chief consort of one of the major kings at the time in that part of the world, named Bimbisara. She was the chief consort of King Bimbisara because of her beauty. She also was extremely smart, very, very sharp, but that isn't what gave her power. What gave her power was her beauty, and that power she could use to get what she wanted. And she became quite prideful, and people were sort of annoyed at it, except for the king, who seemed to like it. And she lived there in the palace, entrenched in her attachment to her own beauty and to the pleasures that it afforded her. But she had enormous potential, because for a very long time, many lifetimes, she had done good deeds, and a long time before that, she had made the aspiration to become one of the chief disciples of the Buddha, chief in wisdom. And so she had done her work for many aeons. She had, for example, when she was a slave girl, she had sold her hair in order to give an offering to the Sangha. And once she, at those times when she had power and wealth, she would give parks and retreats to the Sangha of various Buddhas and various teachers throughout the many, many aeons of her personal development. And so she had a good store of excellent karma. She had planted many good roots. And this good karma versus her current personality of being selfish and prideful, attached to her beauty, these sort of competed in her life as she lived in the palace. And she heard about the Buddha's teaching, and she really wanted to go to meet the Buddha, because it sounded very interesting. I'm like, he really might be onto something. But then she realized, no, I don't want to meet him. He teaches that beauty isn't of true value. Well, I don't want to hear that. And beyond that, he teaches that you shouldn't be prideful. Well, I don't want to hear that. And he teaches that you shouldn't be attached to sensual pleasures. I'm not interested in that at all. I don't want to meet this guy. Mainly because he sounds right. And that's the last thing I want. She didn't have that last thought consciously. That was entirely subconscious. So she remained distant from the Buddha and the Dharma and the Sangha, and she enjoyed herself with the 5 chords of sensual pleasure in the palace. But the king, you see, loved her very much. And he was a stream enterer. He actually had talked to the Bodhisattva before he was enlightened and became the Buddha, and tried to recruit him to become the head of his army, interestingly enough. But the Bodhisattva, who was to become the Buddha, Siddhartha, he went on to practice and achieve awakening. And he told the king that if he attained awakening, he would come back and teach him, and so he did after his enlightenment, and the king became a stream enterer, achieved initial awakening, which is a big deal. It's actually quite profound. There aren't that many stream enterers around nowadays. So he considered the value, the incredible happiness and joy, clarity that had come through this realization, through the teachings that he'd received from the Buddha. He considered that the Buddha had called him his chief attendant. So the king was the chief attendant of the Buddha himself, meaning that he offered him many good things and made sure that he could travel safely through the realm. And beyond that, he had this beautiful and extremely smart consort, or some would say queen, maybe his wife, but probably not, depending on how much you want to elevate her. You tell the story differently, but in any case, he loved her, and she knew she had enormous capacity, and he knew that nothing would benefit her more than meeting the Buddha, and so he had to come up with a plan. And so he thought, what am I going to do to get this woman to meet the Buddha? He thought, well, she likes parks and retreats, beautiful natural settings a great deal, doesn't she? And the Buddha right now is abiding in the Velluvana monastery, which is in a beautiful area with lotus ponds and waterfalls and water lilies and beautiful trees, and some deer wander about. She likes all that. So maybe I can get her to go there. And she also likes music, so So he hired some minstrels to come up with a new song about how beautiful that park is. And he had them wander around the palace singing the song about the Velluvana Grove, which just happened to also be a monastery, but mostly a grove, and how any reasonable person would go and visit it. They sung about that. It's beautiful and you should visit it. And she thought it was a nice song, and so she started singing it herself. And the king heard her sing and said, oh, that's a nice song. What's it about? Well, it's about the grove. Oh, the grove. Have you ever been there? No, I've never been there. You should go. You should go now, today, right away. She said, yeah, maybe. I said, oh no, you should go there today. She said, yeah, but I don't know. It seems kind of crowded. There are a lot of people there, especially a certain one. I said, yes, the Buddha is there, but you should just meet him. I said, I don't know about meeting him. You should meet him. I don't know about that. Well, consider it. She said, okay, I'll consider it. And so he called the carriage, and he put her in it, and he called her attendants, her servants aside, and he told them, you have one job. Make sure that she meets the Buddha. You're not welcome back here until she has met the Buddha. Goodbye. And so they went into the carriage and they brought her. And she looked at the grove and they tried to convince her to meet the Buddha. And she said, yeah, maybe in a little while. And she looked at the waterfall and said, now the Buddha? Maybe, let me look at the deer. And so she saw the deer wandering about, and then they said, but the most beautiful part of the whole grove is where the monastery is. So let's just go and meet the Buddha. And beside, the king said, we can't go back until you do. She said, okay, I will. So this is her good karma. Isn't it good karma? She had the good karma of people forcing her to do what she didn't want to do. A lot of you have that same good karma, I suspect. Because we won't. We know it. We're not going to do what we need to do. This is going to destroy her life, you understand. Everything that she has achieved in her life is about to be eliminated. You all know where the story's going. You already know the end of the story. All the stories end the same way. We wouldn't tell the story if it didn't have that ending. So you know what's about to happen to her life. Everything she loves, she's going to lose. That's what's about to happen. So here she is clinging so tightly to her power, her prestige, her beauty, sense pleasures, being able to get what she wants, without even really thinking about it, just indicating that she might want it, and suddenly it's right there. She was not strong enough to go and meet the Buddha. But good news, she was tricked into it. She did what she didn't want to do because of the efforts of others. And I think that that will happen to a lot of you. So, you're welcome. So she approached the Buddha with some consternation. She saw him in the distance. He was teaching. Thought, I guess I could walk there. And he saw her in the distance. And he immediately saw her extraordinary capacity, her incredible intelligence and wisdom. And so he made an entire Dharma talk just for her. So nice of him. And he started the Dharma talk by using his mystical powers to create, just behind him, a beautiful young woman, maybe in her late teens, who was fanning him with a palm frond. Because it was hot. It was a hot day. And so this apparition was standing there, fanning him. And Khemā saw her there. She thought, oh, look at her. She's really quite attractive. Maybe the Buddha doesn't hate beauty. That would be good. And so she felt a little better. She relaxed a little bit. And so she went a little closer and she saw, wow, this young woman is really, really very beautiful indeed. Interesting. And then she got a little closer and she started to hear the Buddha's teachings. And the Buddha was teaching about impermanence. The Buddha was teaching about how it is that things come and go and things are not dependable. That you want to depend on things like sense pleasures, but they don't give you much pleasure and they just pass away and you've wasted your life. And as he gave this teaching, this young woman, this teenager, grew into the fullness of her beauty, and Khemā suddenly realized, oh, maybe I didn't say. So she's aging quickly. Did you get that? She aged very quickly. She aged, 5 years and 5 seconds. So Khemā suddenly realized that this attendant to the Buddha is more beautiful than I am. And this horrified her, terrified her. And her pride and her conceit broke, cracked, not shattered, but weakened. And she was very worried. And she looked at this person, not so much with jealousy as with horror. And the Buddha kept on talking about impermanence. And as Khemā watched the woman and heard the Buddha, she saw the woman aging more and more. She went from being in her 20s to being in her 30s. She was still beautiful, but then in her 40s and then her 50s and 60s, and she became old and she had broken teeth and her hair was falling out. And she started stumbling around, apparently with dementia. And then suddenly she just collapsed on the ground and died and began to rot there, right in front of Khemā. And Khemā realized at that moment, exactly this is going to happen to me. And there is no way I can escape it. Her body aged and died, this body will age and die, and there's nothing I can do about it. There is no escape. For me to cling to this is irrational. For me to believe in this is irrational. And in that moment, she relinquished her hindrance of covetousness, of sensual desire. And because of that, right then and there, attained stream entry. But the Buddha saw his opportunity. He wasn't going to be satisfied with stream entry in a case like this. I don't think he was ever satisfied with stream entry. But sometimes he knew that this is just the maximum that a person's capacity will allow right now, but he saw that this is not the maximum that her capacity would allow. And so he spoke right to her, and he said the following verses. So those impassioned by passion run with the stream they themselves have made, just as a spider runs along on her web. Cutting through even this, the wise go on without longing, leaving all suffering behind. He said, those impassioned by passion run with the stream they themselves have made. So we seem to be going along with the ways of the world. We seem to be making sense. It seems like things are just flowing in a certain way automatically. I just automatically want sensual desire. I just automatically hate. I'm just automatically selfish. And we go along with that, thinking that it's just the way things are. We don't see that we ourselves made that be the case. In just the same way that a spider runs along and is trapped by her own web that she herself made. And a lot of the time, I don't know why people understand the metaphor this way. They think that the spider is somehow confused about how to be on a web and get stuck in it like a fly would, like she gets tangled in the strands of the web. Obviously, spiders don't do that. That is obviously not a valid interpretation of the metaphor. What happens is that a spider makes a web, and she's free to wander about in it, but she is not free to leave it because it's the thing that traps what she wants, flies. Because it will hold on to what she wants, flies, she holds on to it so that she isn't free. That's the point of the metaphor. It's not like she is unskillful on the web. It's that she's unskillful regarding the web. And she thinks that the web is some reality and some truth that's an inherent source of happiness when in fact it's a trap. The thing that she made to trap others has trapped herself. This is just like power. We think I'm going to use my power. I'm going to lord over others, as Khemā did. But then we ourselves are lorded over by that power. We think, I'm going to own a house. But no, the house owns us. Trapped right there in that house, like the spider is trapped in her web. To cut through this is liberation, and not just liberation from the web. But if a spider leaves the web, the spider is liberated from herself, meaning she's not going to survive. Therefore, it says, cutting through even this, the wise go on without longing, leaving behind all suffering. And with this, Khemā achieved full and complete awakening with many incredible aspects of wisdom, including what's called the analytical knowledges. I don't know of anyone ever who has achieved full awakening that quickly. Maybe one of you does, but I've never heard of it. This was maybe a half an hour. She had never done any training in that lifetime, and she had never practiced meditation. But she had a great capacity, and she faced this basic clinging. And so the story ends very nicely. She went back to the palace, and she met with the king. And typically, if you meet a king, someone like her would curtsy and greet him with respect or something. And also the same would be true of one's husband. She would do that. But she went in and she met him and she did not show any respect at all. She just stood there and looked at him. Because it's not appropriate for a fully enlightened person to bow to a king, unless that king is fully enlightened, which, according to this tradition, can only happen for one day. So, because then he would leave home and become a monk. Well, she was going to leave home and become a nun. But she made a commitment to him. They'd been married and all that, or whatever the arrangement was, depending on who's telling the story. And so, she stood there looking at him, and he saw that she was not going to curtsy. She was not going to bow. And what he did next is just so wonderful. Such a good man. He smiled. And he said, "So, did you meet the Buddha?" Obviously, he knew she'd met the Buddha. Obviously, he knew that. And obviously, he knew he had lost her. That was the end of their relationship. As much as he loved her, that was it. She wasn't going to stay in the palace with him anymore. And yet he smiled, and he wanted to hear all about it. And so he said, "So, tell me, you met the Buddha. Tell me all about it." But she wasn't in the mood for small talk, we'll say. And she cried out to him. She said, "You have seen just a little, but I have seen the true insight taught by the Buddha. You must allow me to leave home, to become a nun." And of course he did. But she wasn't a nun yet, so he could still treat her nicely. He could still treat her, he could still give her some sense pleasures. And so he called that wonderful golden carriage to carry her to the other nuns who had ordained her. And of course, she didn't want to have anything to do with the carriage, but he said, please, out of compassion for me, just a mere stream enterer, out of compassion for me, please, let me do this one last thing for you. It's the last thing I can do for you. I want to do one more thing for you, please. And so out of compassion for him, she was willing to take the carriage to her ordination. So, she faced her craving. She faced this hindrance and experienced insight, deep insight as a result.